Hi, I'm Richard Murphy, and I want to talk about the subject of repaying the national debt. Everyone seems to be obsessed about this, and there's no doubt at all that Rishi Sunak will be talking about it during his spending review on Wednesday this week. What's the issue? Well, the issue is that, according to the Office for National Statistics, national debt is now coming on for £2.1 trillion. That's £2,100 billion. Now, I have reasons for doubting that that's correct, but I'm not going into that here. That's for another time when the research on that issue is finished. Let's just assume for the moment that that number is right, whether or not it is. And let's talk about what makes this figure up and which part of it anybody would want to repay, because as far as I can see, all of it is really useful stuff. Let's break the numbers down, if you like. £200 billion of the national debt is made up of national savings and investment accounts. Near enough. I mean, all these numbers are a little rounder because they obviously change from time to time, but near enough £200 billion. It's in things like premium bonds accounts and national savings accounts, the sorts of things that a lot of people want because they're really safe savings. Now, would we want to deny people the chance to save in that way? If so, why would we want to do that? I don't get it. I don't understand why we would want to actually deny people the chance to save in an appropriate fashion. So my suggestion is we really don't want to repay that part of the national debt. 400 or so, and again, it's a rounded number, billion pounds of the national debt is owned by, well, largely foreign governments. Why do they want to own our national debt? Because, let's be honest, that's helping us fund our deficit, in a sense. Why would they do that? Well, because they want to hold sterling balances. Why do they want to hold sterling balances? Because most governments want to hold portfolios of foreign currencies. But of course, sterling is an important currency. It's still considered to be a reserve currency, a currency in which many transactions take place, even though the transaction might have very little to do with the country in which it takes place. So they want to hold this to guarantee, in essence, their ability to trade. Would we want to repay the debt that guarantees other countries the ability to trade, not only between themselves and other states, but most especially with us? Why would we want to do that? I don't think we would we? In that case, surely we don't want to repay that £400 billion of national debt. Then let's move on to something else. That's the 800 or so billion pounds of national debt that's now owned by the UK government. I mean, this is a significant sum of money. And that's because of quantitative easing. Because of quantitative easing, literally, the Bank of England, but acting wholly on behalf of the Treasury and solely with its permission, buys back UK government debt and does so with newly created money made by the Bank of England for this purpose. Now, you can't repay this part of the national debt because it is owed to anybody. The government literally owns its own debt. That's like owing yourself money, and it's either incredibly easy to repay yourself money that you owe, or frankly, you can't do it. Whichever way you look at it, it's a nonsense to claim the debt can be repaid. So that's £800 billion that we can't repay because it's already effectively being cancelled. I would add, however, and in fairness, I'm going to be fair, that 800 billion leads to a sum roughly equivalent. Actually, it's coming on for £900 billion at present. Broadly speaking, £900 billion owned by UK banks and building societies and deposited by them with the Bank of England on what are called their central bank reserve accounts. Now, that is central bank created money. It's created to basically buy the gilts used in the quantitative easing operation. But because of the nature of the way in which those gilts are bought, and they're paid, of course, from the private sector, but they're paid through commercial banks, and that money remains as a balance between the state and the private sector as a result. Before QE started, there were about £40 billion on these central bank reserve accounts. Now it's going to head to maybe 800 plus, maybe even 900 billion at some point in time, balances on these accounts. But are they a liability? Can they be repaid? How do you repay money unless you pay it in money? And is it possible to repay money with money? Because if you do, don't you just end up with money? Well, of course you do. It's actually not possible to repay money with money. It's a bit like going into the Bank of England and saying, please will you give me £20 in exchange for the £20 note I've got, because it says on it, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. And do you know what they do? They give you a £20 note in exchange. Money can only be repaid with money. So this liability, around £800+ billion at least, is not as such repayable unless the government demands it back in the way of tax, or if it decides to sell new bonds to the private sector, which can be paid for with those balances if the clients of the commercial banks decide to use it for that purpose. So that 800 billion plus is out of action. So what have we done so far? 800 billion cancelled by QE or still sitting on bank accounts but not capable of repayment. 200 billion is in national savings accounts. 400 billion is held by people from overseas and who want to hold UK money. We're talking about 1.4 billion at least now, so that only leaves roughly 700 billion or so of debt over. Well, still a lot of money, but who owns that? By and large, it's owned by banks, it's owned by pension companies, it's owned by life assurance companies, it's owned by savers. Some of them are private individuals as well, but most of them are institutions. Banks use it to assist the flow of funds through the whole of the financial institutions because they don't benefit from something called the savings guarantee that we do if we have up to £85,000 in a bank account. They buy and sell gilts to provide the equivalent of a guarantee on what's called overnight money saved in the City of London. That's a fundamental requirement to now make the banking of the UK work. Would we want to stop the banking system of the UK working? I don't think so. So I really don't think we want to repay debt use for that purpose. Would we want to deny pension funds and life assurance companies the money that they need to guarantee that they can pay pensioners and their people who have policies with them the money that they might be owed, which is what long-term gilts are used for? They are the safest investment, the underpinning guarantee that whatever happens, there should be a repayment. Do we want to undermine pensions? Do we want to undermine life assurance contracts? Do we want to undermine safe savings? I doubt it. But in fact, actually, the number of gilts that have already been repurchased by the government has made them in short supply for this purpose. Add all that up, and near enough every penny of the national debt serves some really useful function inside the UK economy. So tell me which bit you'd like to repay if that's what you want to do. Because it doesn't make sense to repay what isn't actually owing, in the case of the QE debt, or money that actually is serving a useful purpose by being owed over the long term, which is precisely what government debt is designed to do. Some of it takes up to 55 years to be repaid, by the way. Now, if you can answer the question why you want to repay it and why you want to suffer the harms that result from repaying it, poorer savers with less secure saving accounts, weaker pension funds, weaker life assurance companies, weaker banks who aren't holding money on deposit to guarantee that they can pay each other. If you can do all those things and be happy that you can live with the consequences of a weaker financial system, which is much more likely to fail, then by all means tell me you want to repay government debt. But if you don't want to do these things and you don't want to undermine international trade, why do you want to repay the government debt? I'm baffled, confused, amazed. It makes no sense. And that's why I really think the argument that this debt needs repayment is wrong. It's useful, it's beneficial. We don't need to do it. We don't need to have the austerity that repayment would require. We don't need the tax increases that repayment would require. So why are we talking about it? Please, let's stop wasting time talking about something so destructive and instead talk about how national debt can be used to create a better future for everyone, which is the possibility that it provides.
Thanks for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, I'm pleased. If you want to see other videos like this, there are links below this screen. If you want to subscribe, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter as well, @RichardJMurphy. Look at my blog, Tax Research UK. And if you'd like to donate, because this video series is being largely paid for by donations, there is a donations button on every single post on my blog. Thanks a lot.